to go.
Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies is a surprising game in that it not only carefully balances arcade-style gameplay with a somber narrative, but that the narrative itself reaches deep into certain themes of war, with aspects of gameplay that reinforce it. Playing a silent protagonist who only goes by the call sign Mobius 1, the weight of the story is not yours to bear, but instead falls on a man relaying the story of his childhood and his interactions with the enemy during that time. Since Ace Combat 4 is not focused on the reasons behind why wars are started, that is reserved for its sequel, The Unsung War, we are presented with the very simplest of details at the outset. Eurasia has invaded ISAF, the independent state allied forces, and its territories and expulsed them from the continent. Eurasia was aided by the perversion of the Stonehenge installation, a series of giant cannons designed to shoot down incoming meteors that threatened the continent in the past, and repurpose them as long-range anti-air weapons. ISAF was eventually forced to retreat to an area labeled North Point, but not before many battles were fought on the continent, one of which was witnessed by our narrator.
I was just a child when the stars fell from the skies, but I remember how they built a cannon to destroy them. And in turn how that cannon brought war upon us. War was an abstract idea, nothing more than a show on TV. As a child, I only saw it as something that happened in some faraway land. Until that final day of summer. One day while on my way to school, I looked up in the skies. A sound like distant thunder. In the blue skies far above me, contrails drew dizzying circles around in a crazy waltz. A battle in the beautiful skies far away. I could not tear my gaze away from them. A deafening roar. Silhouettes appeared, as if to graze the hills and streak past me. The fighters played the cat or the mouse in turn as they climbed swiftly into the sky. One fleeing plane fell out of the skies, spiraling and spewing orange flames to crash by the Cape. The same Cape where my family lived. Now they only live in my memories of days past. The victor circled around to confirm the kill. And on his craft, there was a large number 13, emblazoned in yellow. I will never forget this.
In all wars, civilian casualties are an inevitability, but for many those casualties never evolve beyond numbers on a datasheet or a total given during a news report. However, just as what was once abstract is made real for our narrator, so too is the data made real for us as we begin to follow this young boy's life during the war. Who is responsible for the death of his family? The most obvious answer may be the aircraft with the yellow 13, which shot down the aircraft that crashed into his home. Or was it the fleeing aircraft that flew low over civilian territory? We see in the image the pilot ejecting safely with a parachute deployed. Whether he is ignorant of his effect on the boy's life or knows the destruction he just caused doesn't matter. Just as civilian deaths are reduced to data, so too are soldiers and their armaments. Are the commanding officers above these pilots responsible for the collateral damage? Do the nations engaging in war have a duty to those displaced and killed by their activities? These are the questions that came to mind while replaying Shattered Skies, and I fear it does not provide a fulfilling answer to them.
And was replaced by foreign MPs.
Mobius 1, the player character, rains destruction that outmatches any other singular pilot in the war. However, your own capability to kill and destroy is never shown to affect non-combatants in a negative way. The only time civilians appear during gameplay missions is when you protect 2 commercial airliners carrying defectors to ISAF territory, and when you liberate the boys' city of San Salvacion, and hear broadcasts of reporters on the ground describing their view of the battle. The impossible truth portrayed is you as the player character are untouchable, both in the air and morally.
Mobius 1, bandit on your tail. Turn hard!
It is now 12:05 a.m. Fuchsia Central Mean Time. Fighting is broken out despite the hour.
Enemy vehicle destroyed.
Mobius 1 occupies a blank slate, upon which not only can the player project their own morality and beliefs, but so too can those who exist within the world. Your allies pin the hope of victory on your presence, while the enemy curses it. Yellow 13 praises your performance in battle and regards you with respect as an honorable pilot.
He's so close. If he manages to stay alive for just a while longer, that pilot could be a worthy opponent.
While the Erusians are your primary antagonistic force on a broad scale, their threat is made specific with two weapons intertwined, Stonehenge and Yellow Squadron. Stonehenge is a series of cannons mentioned at the beginning of the game as railguns designed to destroy meteors. Yellow Squadron is an elite fighter group assigned to protect Stonehenge from attacks and to ensure victory in key battles.
All aircraft, exit from the combat area.
Bombs were delivered to their base. This meant that an enemy who had to be fought by those means was close at hand. The resistance blew up the squadron's runway. Yellow 4 suffered light shrapnel wounds. Though the runway could be fixed, the complete loss of reserve supplies was a heavy blow. Logistics support became infrequent following the Allied operations. I knew this because Yellow Squadron's crew chief bellyached about this all the time to me. I won't complain if I buy the farm while I'm airborne, but I can't stand being taken out while I'm grounded. Now I understand 13's feelings. Reports of the Stonehenge air raid came in. Yellow 4 went up with the others. With no bombs, her plane was light. But her plane was in bad shape. It needed an engine replacement badly.
Both Stonehenge and Yellow Squadron make appearances in missions prior to your ultimate confrontation against them. Stonehenge appears as a sound of destruction that rips the skies above you, forcing you to fly at low altitudes in order to escape death. This happens a few times when your mission places you within range of the installation. Stonehenge occupies a unique space in terms of threat. It is absent from the battlefield, but its presence is felt whenever you are within range. Eventually, you finally confront and destroy this source of attack. Yellow Squadron appears early on to chase you off the map, being impossible to hit and constantly locking onto you while you try to escape. After that, they appear as more of a passive force during certain dogfights, though still invincible. Tasked with protecting Stonehenge, Yellow Squadron fails even this when placed against Mobius 1, and show up after its destruction in order to fight off your group. Having gained enough experience through the previous 11 missions, and with Yellow 4 wounded and needing a replacement engine, you are able to shoot her down easily. Yellow 13 makes his only audio appearance here, asking if anyone saw Yellow 4 eject. She did not.
Mobius 1, the other aircraft are withdrawing. That's a confirmed kill on a Yellow. It's a complete victory for the good guys.
Having Stonehenge make its presence known through attacks despite being hundreds of miles away really builds up both its capability as a superweapon and also as a shadow over any mission taking place within its range. When you see the map grid during a briefing and notice that the mission area is within the dotted line, you know your mission will most likely require you to fly low to the ground in order to avoid being blown apart by Stonehenge. This fear makes it so satisfying to finally confront your phantom threat head-on, immobilize it, and eliminate it for future missions. Likewise with Yellow Squadron, they appear as targets that severely outmatch you. Unable to land a hit, you are powerless in their presence, and have to make adjustments in future missions to not waste time attempting to land a shot, and instead focus on other lesser pilots.
I thought of the words I would use to confront him and bided my time. Although I harbored these feelings within me, I could never get close to him. His wingman was always by his side. Despite having a gentle demeanor, I could tell that the wingman would never allow danger to get near Yellow 13, even on land. The pillar of their group, 13 exuded an air of invincibility. He always chose to fly a 5-plane formation. He was a man who prided himself not on his kill record, but on his record of never losing a squadron member.
Shooting down Yellow 4 is both an accomplishment because it shows how far the player and Mobius 1 have come since the initial confrontation. That same victory is undercut with sorrow at the loss of someone who has never been shown to harbor ill will or malice. Yellow 4 simply desired to protect Yellow 13, who likewise prided himself on never losing a wingman until now. Our respect and the young boy's burgeoning love for Yellow Squadron undercuts any victory over them and turns it into a complicated weave of emotions.
He would bear no resentment about being shot down. He said this himself. And so as time passed, I found the goodness of a home in their company. Leaving them was no longer an option for me now.
Yellow 13's portrayal throughout the game goes against traditional villain and instead is more of a rival pilot. Even then, the stereotype falls short, since he is not obsessed with Mobius 1, but instead awaits the ultimate confrontation that will lead to his death with open arms. His introduction as the enemy ace doesn't present him as someone clearly evil or antagonistic towards ISAF. Instead, he sits on the back of a bar strumming a guitar. Yellow 13 unwittingly requests the boy whose parents he inadvertently killed to play a song with him, one that turns out to be a favorite of that boy's deceased father.
His new tally up to 64 kills. With a tentative smile, the man with the guitar turned to me and asked me to accompany him on my harmonica. I brought it up to my lips and I started a new song. I had finally found him. But by some fluke, it was my father's favorite song, the one he used to play at the end of each day.
Late in the game, with the loss of Yellow 4 and the constant turnaround of pilots in Yellow Squadron, his attachments to this world are gone. Even the 2 children he watched over turn against him. One night, the barkeep's daughter is caught planting detonators for the resistance and flees. Yellow 13 catches her, confirming she was responsible for the sabotage he so detested that caused Yellow 4's death. The young boy is nearby and appears yelling,
"Get out of our town, you fascist pig,"
at Yellow 13. Clearly hurt by this betrayal from the only 2 he had left, Yellow 13 allows them to leave, either because of their tender ages or because of his own disgust at Eurasia, which is only increased by the Eurasian tactics during defense of San Salvacion, placing AA guns atop hospitals.
It seemed like an eternity passed before he said go and released us.
At the outset of the campaign, the Eurasians are simply a faceless enemy with no place on the moral spectrum. However, through the eyes of the child, we begin to witness a growing desperation. Had the barkeep's daughter been caught for her sabotage, she most likely would have been killed despite her age. This is something Yellow 13 probably had on his mind when he ultimately allowed them to go free. Placing AA guns atop hospitals was most likely done to encourage ISAF fighters to not shoot at them for fear of casualties. Although in the following mission, I destroyed many defense installations with no pushback from the civilian or Allied radio reports during the battle. This course of desperation reaches its end in the penultimate mission when you capture the Eurasian capital of Fermonti. After wiping out what remains of Yellow Squadron, your ally radio calls out finding the Eurasian leader committed suicide with his wife and child nearby. It calls to mind the suicide of Hitler, who would rather die than face justice for his actions before and during the war. While this illusion was probably meant to show the guilt and cowardice of the man who started a meaningless war, it is also kept separate from the morality of Yellow 13. Our strongest connection to the Eurasians and a man who served out of duty. This death seems to answer my earlier question of who is responsible for the destruction waged by war. And Ace Combat 4 appears to answer that it falls on those who hold the most power among the aggressors. Failing to acknowledge ISAP's own ability and responsibility for collateral damage undercuts this, seemingly justifying war so long as you are the one on the defensive, despite what war naturally causes. It's a complicated answer, something that is mirrored by the complicated feelings towards killing Yellow 4. Someone who didn't necessarily deserve death, but died anyway, because the mission called for it and I was duty-bound to honor it.
I wondered if the fateful enemy Ace, the one that Yellow 13 longed to meet, is among them. What would happen if they ever came face to face? I fell in with the routed Erusians and followed after
Despite his hatred for the Erusian forces for occupying his town and disrupting peace, and his hatred for Yellow 13 for the Cape crash, the boy continues to follow Yellow Squadron after the liberation of his hometown. By this point, the boy has long abandoned his plan to confront Yellow 13 about his part in his family's death. The boy can't bring himself to confront 13 now, after learning so much about him, after being cared for by him, and after seeing him suffer familial loss in war too. In an early scene, the boy is shielded from the cold night by a Yellow Squadron jacket, most likely placed there by their ace pilot. Yellow 13 ultimately gets the fate he wanted, death at the hands of a pilot better than he. The dogfight takes place over Forbanti, the Erusian capital, and penultimate mission of the game. Victory is all but assured with the capture of the enemy capital, but in rides Yellow Squadron, ever loyal to their duty to serve Erusia, even if it means embracing death. Mobius 1 shoots each one down.
That's a kill. Great job. There are no aircraft remaining on radar.
A theme I didn't realize until this playthrough was that of memories, and how speaking them is enough to keep them alive. This is first mentioned by the boy when he recalls how Yellow 13 spoke after Yellow 4's death. After Yellow 13's death, the handkerchief that is buried represents both Yellow 4 and Yellow 13's lives, and the memories the barkeep's daughter and the boy have of them. These memories are kept alive even still by the framing device of the game, the letter being written by the now grown boy to you, Mobius 1. By writing this letter, he kept the memories of Yellow 13 alive, and by playing the game, you keep it alive by watching and participating in it. While it may not be a true story, it is still effective at portraying personal tales during a meaningless war.
The terms of surrender were accepted that day, and the war was over.
A lack of identity in Mobius 1 is used to speak directly to the player. AWOX makes a request that you provide a victory on his birthday, the airbase you're protecting wants to relay their thanks to you, and allies get emotional when you're put in danger. These voices aren't directed at the character of Mobius 1 since it doesn't exist. Instead, they are directed at you, the player, in order to gain your sympathy and make victory not something to be viewed distantly, but something you actively achieved. Video games consistently do this more often than any other form of media due to their interactive nature, but not all are as successful as Shattered Skies at making the player engage with the gameplay in order to win, not just because it is how you progress, but because it means victory for you and your allies.
Enemy vehicle destroyed. Tank destroyed.
Despite being restricted to dots on your radar and voices through a radio filter, friend and foe alike have a human weight to them. This is continually built up on over the course of the 4-hour campaign, and culminates in the final mission, as you shoot down each plane in order to hopefully keep your own friends alive. You quicken your pace as the ground forces take losses and audio plays of their battle in a place you cannot reach. Instead, you make your way through small spaces and destroy generators in order to open up the final missile silo and eliminate the final threat to total victory. Throughout the mission, the strongest tracks of the gameplay: Rex Tremende, Megalith Agnus Dei, and Heaven's Gate.
Sky Eye here. All Mobius aircraft report in.
Mobius 2 on standby.
ready for battle. All aircraft follow Mobius 1.
This final mission is a great end to a surprisingly emotional arcade flight simulation game. I have always had an emotional connection to this game since I first played it in the early 2000s. I am very happy that it continues to hold up nearly 17 years later. Yellow 13 has a wonderfully somber story, and I hope the memory of it continues to live through the retelling and replaying of Shattered Skies for years to come.
The once familiar scent of burning jet fuel has long since faded away. What was once Yellow Squadron's runway is now just a local highway again. I write this letter to you now. I know it must have brought him unexpected joy to have an opponent like you at the end of that meaningless war. At least that's what I want to believe. Only you, the pilot who shot him down, can confirm this. And so, I write to you.